is that Africans are now beginning to see beyond the next election. Because part of our problem in Africa has been that we plan in 5-year circles. We don't have a grand agenda, but now we have a grand agenda. And if you look at the 7 pillars of Africa Agenda 2063, everything is covered.
If you see me in the streets, better holler at me. Seeking for a beat, throw them dollars at me. I don't like defeat, take that away from me. You tryna be like me, you couldn't handle my story. But we gon' let you know, we gon' let you know. We gon' let you know, we gon' let you know.
You'll see Bill Gates come and meet your president. You'll see Tony Blair come and meet your president. You'll see Macron come and meet your president. You'll see all of them. And then they will never admit, but they'll be told, if you want money in agriculture, behave this way. If you want money in this area, behave this way. They will never tell that to the Chinese. They will never tell that to the Indians. They will never tell that to the Vietnamese. They will never tell that to the Koreans, but in Africa, they tell us. That is why, as I speak to you now, under this new scramble, the IMF and the World Bank are back, telling you who to hire in your universities, what to sell and what not to sell. It is a sad situation. So today, as I look at Africa in that new scramble, the Chinese are here. I hope that this institution was not built by the Chinese. The Turks are here. The British are here. The French are here. The Qataris are here. The Americans are here. This time round, they are so subtle that we don't even recognize them, but they control us. What are we going to do about it in order to develop? We must do something. And if we don't do that thing else, you who have been trained in this institution, you have traveled the world. You have traveled Nigeria. There are 2 things that you can do with your traveling. You can marvel. Says it is great in China. You can marvel. You can wonder or feel pain. I'm urging you to feel pain. To feel pain for the continent of Africa, and in your own way, when you go out there, go and do something about it, because it has also been demonstrated that it can be done. I've traveled across this continent and I've seen that development is possible. I was in Rwanda before 1994. I was in Rwanda in 1996. Genocide. 1 million dead. Its obituary written. Will never rise, they said. You go to Rwanda now. They are demonstrating that it can be done. Go to Kigali now. See what they are doing in the health sector in their own small way. See how they are collaborating in the area of mobile telephony in their own small way. It can be done. I've been to Botswana and I've seen what they are doing in their own small way. I've been to Mauritius, see what they are doing in their own small way. And they do not have the resources that other countries have. They do not have the resources that the Democratic Republic of Congo has. And I'm giving these examples to say that indeed it can be done, and it can be done within the continent of Africa. So what we must do is to begin to pull together, you know. As I've been sitting and listening, I was also struggling to have internet in this room. And every effort was being made to connect me to internet. And all those efforts failed. Why? Because we are in an era of the Internet of Things. We are in an era of nanotechnology. It cannot be right that in Africa's largest economy, in Nigeria, I do not have internet at an institution that deals with security. You get the point that I'm trying to make? It cannot be right. And I know why we don't have internet connectivity. It is because we are divided. We have 55 telephone access codes. Nigeria 234, Ghana 233, Kenya 254, Tanzania 255, Uganda 256, Zambia 260, Zimbabwe 263. How can we, in this day and age, you cross into Benin, you cross into Togo, you cross into Guinea-Bissau, you have a different internet connectivity. Why can't Africa have a single satellite and a single telephone code so that when I travel from Mogadishu in Somalia to Dhaka in Senegal, like the Chinese do, like the Americans do, like the Indians do, we can have the same, because communication is critical to development. And I'm saying this, part of my agenda is to prick your conscience with live examples that you may go out there irritated, but irritated to do the right thing. And I'm suggesting that indeed, when we talk about development, this is what we must do. But is Africa conscious of her state? Yes, Africa is conscious. This is what makes me happy. That after all these analysis, it appears to me that Africans have now recognized that going forward, we can only defeat the conspiracies, we can only have development as we are talking about it by working as a team. And that is why beyond the Millennium Development Goals, beyond the Sustainable Development Goals, we as Africans under the aegis of the African Union do now have our grand vision of Africa Agenda 2063. And that Africa Agenda 2063, let me tell you, if we can fulfill it, many of you here will be upstairs by the year 2063. But our contribution, perhaps you do not know what I mean upstairs, not up. You will be with the Lord himself. But the most important thing is that Africans are now beginning to see beyond the next election. Because part of our problem in Africa has been that we plan in 5-year circles. We don't have a grand agenda, but now we have a grand agenda. And if you look at the 7 pillars of Africa Agenda 2063, everything is covered. Health is covered. Research and science is covered. Climate change is covered. Women's participation is covered. Democracy and governance is covered. The arts and the culture are covered so that Africa can become a serious player in the international agenda. As we speak now, we are not a serious player. You know, and I say this perhaps too often, but I must repeat it because it is important. I was looking at the GDP of Indonesia. The GDP of Indonesia this year, by the end of this year, will be 1.1 trillion United States dollars. Indonesia is the 17th largest economy in the world using all critical indices. It's amongst the G20. The population is about 200 million, just about Nigeria. Nigeria is a GDP give and take at the very best of 550 billion United States dollars. I'm looking at the power generation in Nigeria. At the very best, you generate about 17,000 megawatts. You lose about half of it, so that what goes into the grid is no more than 8,000 to 7,500 megawatts into your GDP. You are the biggest economy in the world. If you look at Iran, Iran generates 75,000 megawatts. So when we talk about industrialization, we are not even close to industrialization. Look at the diversity of power generation that you have. Most of it is hydro. You are not harnessing your solar. The Kainji dams and the other dams with climate change are going to dry. If you look at the major rivers, it means that you are going to be in trouble. You look at Zimbabwe now, for example, in power generation, 2,000 or give it 2,500 megawatts. The dams are drying, the Kariba is drying. So Africa must begin to think, even as we think of Africa Agenda 2063, because energy is the game changer. Without energy, all these generators you see everywhere in Nigeria must disappear for industrialization to come. And in many African countries, including my own country, Kenya, which generates, I think we have about slightly under 3,000 megawatts. You can't. You can't. So we must go to Inga Dam. We must begin to generate. We must go to Egypt at the Aswan High. Egypt is not doing very badly. We must go to Inga, produce 40,000 megawatts. We must go to Ethiopia, the Grand Renaissance Dam, produce 10,000 megawatts. Then we talk of industrialization. And why do I talk about industrialization? There are scientists here. It is only through industrialization that we are going to be manufacturers in all sectors. As it is now, 80% of what we consume in manufactured goods are from China. If China closes shop, we are dead. We are dead. So I'm thinking that Africa Agenda 2063 is a good thing, but we must work at it. I'm thinking that Africa Continental Free Trade Area is a good thing. Launched with the Secretariat in Accra, Ghana, a good thing. But how are we going to trade? How are we going to get somebody to drive a truck from Accra, Ghana to Juba or to Asmara in Eritrea without peace and security? So you can also see that peace and security is at the very heart of it. In the United States of America, and many of you are familiar, you can drive a truck from Florida through to Alberta in Canada, and it is safe. The roads are good, the security is there. I'm saying, therefore, that as we talk about development, we must think about development in a very comprehensive manner. We must ask ourselves how we govern. And I want to conclude my presentation to you by telling you that Africa must be very careful. We must be very careful because of lack of resources in Africa. I'm beginning to hear things that worry me. And because I'm a keen student of what is happening in Africa, I'm getting worried on a daily basis. The forces that divide us, the belief by many people in Africa that if we separated from our current countries, we would be better. It is beginning to happen. It is happening here in Nigeria. It is happening. I saw a letter last week addressed to the president of Zambia by a people in Zambia called Baroseland. And they are telling President Hakainde Hichilema that you remember in 1964 we had an agreement with the Lusaka government that the time has now come for Baroseland to become an independent country. Can you believe it? I hear people in Namibia saying, do you remember that there was a strip called the Caprivi Strip? I hear people in Ghana saying that you remember that in the Volta region we had a different country. I hear people in Zimbabwe saying that there should be a country called Mtuakazi. I hear people in South Africa, the South Africans, saying that we should have a separate country in the Western Cape. I hear people in Ethiopia saying we should have Tigray and Oromo. The centrifugal forces are there. And the only way to bring them in is to create a sense of belongingness. The people must feel that they are part of it. I remember the words of John Garang of South Sudan. When he spoke in Khartoum, he told the Numeri government, we do not want to create a separate state, but make unity attractive. Make unity attractive, make Sudan attractive, make Khartoum attractive, because if you don't make it attractive, we will separate, and that will make us weaker. And I'm saying this because of this thing we call democracy. Democracy demands that people have a sense of belonging and that they believe that the country in which they live represents their interests and that deliberate efforts are being made in that regard. So, fellow Africans, I'm one who believes that this continent has a contribution to make. There is not a continent today that has the natural resources that this continent has. Not one. There is not a continent today that has a population as young as ours, which could be a resource. There is not a continent. There is not a continent today that has the resources in different diverse ways which can be harnessed. With a population of 1.4 billion, we are a potential market, but we must also warn ourselves. I am aware that you are talking about climate change. It is only through unity, therefore, that we can fight all these. Our rivers are drying. Lake Chad has shrunk by nearly 1/3. The rivers are drying. The climate is changing. The Sahara is coming down south. The rivers down are drying or getting polluted. Our farms are not yielding the way they were yielding before. Our seeds are being destroyed. Our young men and women are running away. And remember, the Germans are now saying, we want young people. The Canadians are saying, we want young people. We are in danger. You who have been trained in this institution, now go back to your countries and tell your countries that yes, there is a conspiracy against the continent of Africa, but the human relationship, is it not about conspiracy? Even in families, are there not conspiracies? Is it not our duty to fight and defeat those conspiracies so that that is no longer an excuse? Go out there and say that we have the possibilities and that these possibilities require and demand that we look at Africa as a total whole. And all of us who are here, whether we are politicians or academics and in different sectors, let us go out there having made a solemn vow that Africa must do it. If you can't do it for yourself, ask yourself which Nigeria you want to bequeath to your children and your children's children. You are here, maximum 40 years, you will have gone upstairs. But after 40 years, in which kind of country will you want your children to be? This is the question. It is not about you and me. It is about them. This is intergenerational. Africa must change. Africa can change. And it can only change if we change our minds. And our minds we must change.
Creation, reaction, God. Big up TRB family. Misterjaay, I see you. I know some artists don't do this. God bless you and your families.